Yeah, I mean, talk slow and I'll take the hand over.
You're good.
I think
The first thing we had on our agenda anyways was just a quick draft consensus.
Yeah.
But I have gotten a couple of emails from people saying, going through all of those is really helpful because not everybody, of course, watches every negotiation session.
No.
Amazing. But especially since this could potentially be our last session. We have one more scheduled session. So, you know, happy back with you next week. And of course, if we need more, we can schedule more. But always good to kind of have the quadruple check. So Shelby, were you good with going over those? You want us to do that? I know you were teaching today.
Yep. Yeah. She's gonna be reading from the slides. But, we know all of these.
Yeah.
This is just for everybody.
But I didn't leave off the district proposals this time, like
So sorry.
last time. So.
Okay. Slide 1. We put into our draft consensus, ding, ding, some updated language on our drug-free schools policy as proposed by the district. And kind of right along with that, we also updated language on our non-resident students policy to codify kind of an alternated schedule and allow students from residents, non-resident students to attend Olathe. We also updated early childhood language to include kindergarten enrollment day to accurately reflect what our early childhood educators kind of put into those events. Sorry, I'm like busting through these. So we also updated language concerning plan time to make it more reflective and accurate for all of our staff, including our RSPs. Our CEU proposal language was accepted with a couple of changes and things like that for our educators who use CEUs. They will now have the time during professional development, partnering with their principal in order to work on credits for those CEUs, as well as kind of going on to plan time and things like that for extraordinary or unscheduled behavior events centered quite often on our SPED staff and support staff. If there are several events that are impacting
It's a Monday.
impacting their plan and lunch and the ability to have those protected times regularly, that is going to be encouraged to be a conversation with administration. We had changed language on Medicaid billing, so our staff members that deal with Medicaid billing will now have time allotted in the day for that to be handled, so that those can be inputted same day that those services are received. Our leave bank language was also updated to kind of reflect some changes to get rid of like illness and bereavement, etc. And it is what else did we change on that?
Yeah, the big thing there would be the big employees to be able to access it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that was the big one. Thank you. Sorry, I knew I was missing a big change on that. ONEA's proposal on leave was employees may be allowed to retain 4 PTO days, and that was accepted by the district. And that is prior to their leave beginning. Is that bookmarked as we're done on that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, we had a couple calendars.
Mhm.
Well, we had a scenario on leave that was super specific. Ooh.
It was that language that's in red on the screen right now, that if employees want to extend the child, when the extension happens, then they can elect to change what they had previously reserved. Yeah. I think that was.
I thought another question popped up, but it was very, if it comes back, it'll come back, but it was very rare of a circumstance.
I knew you flew through those.
Was it related? It came to me and then it didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those,
One
like,
of
if this happens and
And this happens, then, but we'll
Yeah.
put our brains back together.
the
and
one
see if
leave
we
was
can-
exactly the
yeah, it was like if two scenarios would have to like perfectly align. But it was very specific.
Okay, childbirth leave when not on FMLA.
That is. Like a first year employee, is that what we were thinking of? Somebody that didn't qualify?
Well, we'll put it up to them. But I think the language that we settled on last time will be sufficient for the vast majority of our weird situations.
Mhm.
So that takes us to discussion of previous proposals, unless there's anything else on our draft consensus.
Mind if I pop on here?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't have to unpop, you can just pop. Okay. I think. Oh, actually, no, I have to, I do have to. press the button. And as you're projecting, I will say I've gotten a couple of questions the past week about calendars. And a lot of the questions have to do with, you know, why are we going 4 days longer in 26, 27 than 25, 26? So I've been trying to articulate that we're not going longer. Yes, the date is later, but that's just because 25, 26 Memorial Day is so early and that calendar has a lot of uniqueness. So I'll continue to make those clarifications, but I thought I'd mention it here. Because it was not just one person.
So this is in response to two policies that were presented and brought forward last week regarding elementary traveling specialist and then also elementary specialist. And so we wanted to provide a little bit of background and kind of insight on plans for 25, 26 as it relates to traveling specialists. Because the district has already made some adjustments for next year. You can see here that for next year, we have moved forward with hiring 4 itinerant elementary specialists. So of course that'd be a library and media specialist, the art and music teacher. And these newly hired itinerant specialist teachers will be split between Manchester Park and Clearwater Creek Elementary, which are our 2 largest elementary schools. They will spend a day at Clearwater Creek and 3 days at Manchester Park, per that A through D rotation. And in each of the schools, the schedule is set so they have at least 1 hour plan, 25-minute lunch, and a minimum of 30 additional minutes that could be used as PLC once a week and or service the building. And that there are also days that they have additional time beyond this. They'll spend the entire day at the school, so there won't be any traveling during the day for this group of itinerant specialists. And then just kind of a side note, when we talk about Manchester Park, the schedule is set so that the 2 immersion classes have the same special on the same day at the same time, which is going to be really helpful for them to be able to have opportunities to collaborate as a grade level team. In addition to those newly hired itinerant specialists, we also will have to have 2 other buildings that need support next year, and they are Mahaffey and Regency Place. And so you can see here that our plan is for Westview and Havencroft specialists to support those 2 buildings respectively. And each specialist teacher will need to travel 1 day for that A through D rotation for 1 1-hour class. And their schedules have been devised so that the specialists will either start or end their day at Mahaffey or Regency Place so that they're not toggling back and forth. This then means that for next year, all elementary specialists will have between 2.4 and 16.4 additional hours each week beyond their planned PLC and duty-free lunch. So we felt like those were really important points to kind of bring forward. And so in summary, we've done a great deal of work and investment for 25, 26. And ramifications of those decisions are, number one, that it ensures our students can continue to receive outstanding experiences in those specialist classes. It also makes sure that our elementary educators, that includes both our classroom and our specialists, are provided planned PLC and duty-free lunch. It minimizes the number of specialists who have to travel. And it minimizes the time traveling specialists spend transitioning between buildings. And then, of course, because of that, it maximizes that instructional time of all of our specialists and provides for consistency and cohesiveness in all of the buildings. But all of this comes with a cost. So our investment was about $300,000. That's an average of $75,000 per specialist. But then also another key piece to this was it allows administrators to have some flexibility in scheduling to meet the needs of all of their students. So keeping all of that in mind, the language that we wanted to counter back with was on the elementary scheduling document. So this is Appendix B. You can see here that this is the section that talks specifically about time outside of plan, PLC, and day free lunch. And we kept all of that language. We felt like it was meeting the needs, but did add a notation in there that collaboration needs to be happening with the specialist and the building principal. Needs to happen at the start of each semester and then be documented by the principal. And I think, our overriding kind of thought on all of this is that, we write policy so that there's a guardrail and an expectation set. And if something isn't happening that adheres to policy, then we need to know to be able to address that. And I know it's noted that we always want to start at the lowest level possible, and that really needs to start with our building principals. So if there is an issue, we would expect that somebody would let us know or let the building principal know. But we felt like adding this language gives both the building administrator and the specials teacher really kind of that set expectation, so that we kind of maybe don't end up in those situations where one or the other feels like there maybe wasn't clear communication.
Making sure. So, at least for next year, would be two schools, elementary specialists that would be traveling to support 2 more schools in addition to the itinerant, Westview and Havencroft.
You got it.
Okay.
Could you share those slides in our?
Yeah.
Professional council? It just makes it easier for
Yep.
the details, all caps that I have.
I'll put this in there too.
Okay, perfect.
That's an printing issue. Just glad to have. something
Yeah.
like that.
Something like that. I think we keep going, and then at some point we need to
Have a
caucus.
conversation.
Yep.
Caucus about more than one thing at a time.
You got it.
Efficient with our time.
You want me to pop off here?
Sure.
I'll pop off and you can pop on.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So on appraisal, we had just a couple of things.
Perfect for us.
Yeah, so I'm.
You just sent me these today.
Okay, well, so we agree we need to update them. And, as you said previously, sometimes you don't like putting the specific
The numbers
numbers in
in.
policy and.
They updated those statutes like, I want to say 6, 7 years ago, but there's no rhyme or reason. Some places they've updated them like.
Yeah, because
Oh,
I pulled it
what's
directly
that?
from PSC.
Yeah,
Related.
pages and they are, so it's, yeah.
Not that makes that easy. One question that popped up, and this is probably something we talked about in appraisal, Michelle, and I'm just not remembering, is I had a question today about why SLPs aren't on the list of specialized rubric people.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
a good question.
Mhm.
They are not on that list because they are evaluated at the building
Level. So because we already have buildings, that rubric we tested that way.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was kind of remembering. but I
Yeah,
wasn't
this
sure.
got really like kind of truly in minutia as we were going through, because that is not a comprehensive list of all of the specialist rubrics we created. This is just the list of those that are not evaluated by a building principal that are also maybe, or maybe they are, but in those 5 pilot buildings, we don't have one of these people on eval.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think the only other thing we had just on this, and it's more just like, this has popped up before, we just want to make sure that pilot, we have enough time to test all the pieces. And we've talked a little bit about like the assistance panel
Yeah.
and figuring out how we can
I know.
pilot that. I know we haven't landed that one
Figure that
necessarily,
out.
but there's so many pieces of this. I had a question today and I would have never thought about this, but as we're communicating this out, these are the things that sometimes our bargaining unit needs help making the connections. KEEP, which is the acronym for the appraisal system that we're piloting. Or people are getting that confused with like a retention, like keep people.
Oh.
So we will
Yeah.
continue to make sure that we spell out the Kansas Educator Evaluation Protocol. I knew there was a second E in there. That's not necessarily tied to retention, although having a more streamlined appraisal system, we hope will be. But yeah, so that was another question I got you. That was like, oh, I would have never thought keep. Yeah, that does make sense. But.
Yeah.
And then on this piece, we had a couple of minor
Oh,
things. Julia, do you want me to talk about the stuff on the side? Or are you good?
I can talk to them.
Okay, yeah.
Really quick. Since I have it, I can. So I looked through the pilot handbook and the draft rubrics. There we go. All those words coming to me. And just a couple of things that we noticed. Something that we're doing throughout the document with the language committee that's not necessarily committee, is just include the inclusive language. So replacing his, her with their, that's a simple one. And then there's some potential conflicts with the definitions or like the words that are being used, with the keep, from like the state versus what's in our negotiated agreement. And one of them is like the traveling specialist. It's written up there, the educator that travels teaching in more than one school, and it has a reference to special educators, but that's not who our typical traveling ones are in our district. So it just like to double check that there. And then the suggested language change is having on the assistance review panel, rather than it saying ONEA president and kind of pinning that to one person, the other options there all have a like or designated person. And so just opening that up a little bit to where if the president isn't available for one reason or another, having it be 2 educator representatives. So it still could be the president, but it could also be a different educator or a different executive board member or whomever the president decides. Because it's also just thinking like that works when we know we have Angie, but we may have a president in the future that might not have the same capacity for sitting on the panel. So.
And I was just thinking about, what if I had somebody that I worked with at Northwest for 20 years?
Right.
That was
Yeah.
on the assistance panel. Probably wouldn't want me on that for a
Yeah.
whole bunch of reasons, so.
Yeah, so just kind of opening it up a little bit, but still have the president involved, but not be necessarily the person.
I apologize, I meant to print this and it didn't print. But we have a copy of compensation that's coming up and I'll jot down
And that was the only
Gotta get
language
this
change that we
Oh,
had.
okay.
That was the, yeah.
Needed to.
Do you know, Julia, on that page 18, is the itinerant, is that like, is it in the glossary and what their definition of itinerant is?
So the itinerant educator is in the glossary
Mhm.
from the key manual.
Uh-huh.
Page 18 and page 100 are in our current agreement. And I don't know if there is a conflict. I just thought
Maybe don't.
there may be not perfect, so we thought we'd double check that
Okay, got it.
with your lens.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's all we have.
Yeah, I do have one random with the rubrics. There, so all of the rubrics, and this might just be a me thing, but they had, the like highly effective, and those, the PBIS coach was the only one that had them reversed. So it had ineffective first down to highly effective. And yeah, I didn't know if that was just a formatting or like copy over to the template sort of thing. or-
Right, and so here's what happened, it's kind of like what we currently have, you know, we don't really have.
On
a
paper, yeah.
Copy of.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, PBIS coach was the only one, and it just like stuck out to me because I was so used to, and I was like, wait a sec, that's not this, and then, yeah, so I
Okay.
like cross-checked them, but.
I'm like 90%
Here.
positive that Anne Marie is the one who mentioned we should flip those. And so it's kind of funny that it's the PBIS. She was like, 'cause they were all that way, so why don't we start with ineffective? Why don't we do the other way?
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, that was very minor. And yeah, I knew that the paper rubrics are probably not used very often, but
No, that's great.
so that was the only thing.
we're Bureau clerking on it.
So, talking about compensation, first we want to start with a summary of what the district's proposal was last time, that the step movement would not happen, but that column movement for eligible educators would, the base would be increased to 50,000. The district proposal did not include any of the other cost-bearing proposals that we've discussed. But it did offer to absorb the increased health insurance cost. And I include our model's estimate of the cost just because it's slightly different than yours. My model presumes that 20% of people are moving columns in a given year rather than assuming a fixed volume. The only reason I include that there is not because I think ours is better or worse, just so that way we're comparing apples to apples when we talk about our costs. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that like this is an offer that we know in a challenging legislative year that this represents a very strong investment, and we appreciate the work that's gone into that. And so as we go through our counter, you'll see, I think we're countering, it is an increase in cost, but it's not an increase to the degree that some counters have been in the past, because we do acknowledge that like, we know we're kind of in the couch cushion territory here.
Great term.
So a couple of the proposals that, you know, we discussed that in concept and theory, it seemed like everyone was on board that these were maybe good ideas, but that we're tabling for future bargains are the reimbursement for CEUs and the 403B match, that we'll kind of keep those on the radar for maybe if we have a nicer day sometime in the future, but yes. But wanted to look at the ECAS committee work. That committee recommended 9 proposals from this year. And in most of those cases, these are things where work is already being done, but it's being done in a way that is either unpaid or underpaid compared to what it seems like they probably ought to be. So our proposal would be to fund all 9 of those recommendations that came across in this year's ECAS committee. I know we had discussed a holdover item. We don't have that in our proposal, but we do propose the 9 that this year's committee worked through. The estimated cost increase on that is 174 something, but that is based on the current base. When I wrap up our whole package, that will, everything kind of builds on each other. But
And do you have those 9 delineated somewhere, Eric? Or
um,
we just need to refer back?
I think we need to refer back. I don't have those
That's
printed
fine.
out again.
I might have.
On the paid coverage rate, we do think this is an important piece to discuss. It hasn't been adjusted in many years. And we hear about this particularly from our elementary educators when we're talking about splitting classes and that kind of thing. This is similar logic to thinking about the event rate increase. That's proposal 1 on the ECAS. And so our proposal would be to increase that paid coverage rate from $30 to $40 as proposed earlier this bargaining session. Based on the conversations we had at that time, we thought that cost would be an estimated about 102,000. Yeah, and that's the exact figure based on the data that was shared at that point.
I do have copies of all of this. I'm just putting the slides at the top.
We do think that step movement is something that is important. It's valued as a recognition of experience and continued professional development, particularly because the agreement that we made last year resulted in kind of some banding at the top of the scale already. And I know that in the past we've discussed that that's not necessarily a desirable feature to have a bunch of different levels of experience all grouped together. We also think that step movement is important because when we design this salary schedule, it has that sustainability piece that as we march people down the scale, we get folks to that 25th, or it's the 24th step, it is still step 25, where we reach what we kind of call that career earnings number, and then the steps become a little bit cheaper. So if we can move steps, we think that it is valuable to do. So that's why our proposal is to go ahead and have everyone step 1 down this year. And the estimated cost of that is about 2.9 million. The piece where that trades off then, so that we're not asking for the moon, is in the increase to the base. We think that our district retains very competitive benefits and a highly experienced staff, and that experienced staff makes us expensive, and we know that, but that retention is important. We do know that maintaining a competitive base salary is a component to that shared interest of recruitment. So our proposal would increase that base salary almost $1,000 to $49,475. That has an estimated cost of about $3 million. And so in total, when you add up all of those components, my estimate is that our proposal is at about 10.9 million, which is about 1 million more than what our estimate is on the district's offer. All of those things.
More of the copies with
Of the ECA.
ECA.
Yeah.
Enough copies of this one.
Yeah.
Everybody got one?
You guys want to see what's on the previous item also, or this? I think we got set up in there.
Yeah.
All right.
Do we have an estimated it's time for return, or do you want to just let us know?
I can just text you, or you can text.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
Whoa. Don't make it sound cheesy.
I know, right?
So you'll have to kind of bear with us because the tracking of changes, colors are all different. So we tried to add your proposed language in. And it's pinkish purple and then there's green. So just, we're gonna roll with that. So we did have a couple of changes and suggestions for the language on elementary traveling staff. So number 5, if you can see at the bottom, we kept the 4 additional points kind of the same. And point number 5, we added at the start of each semester, the traveling specialist and the principal at the supported building will meet to establish, and then we have kind of included language from last time, access to appropriate instructional spaces, materials and technology, sufficient transition time, inclusion and communication and collaboration leaves, and student access equitable to equitable learning experiences. So the language is taken from our proposed language from last time, and we've kind of included your language, like the norm to meet at the start of each semester to collaborate with the principal. Kind of going underneath that, under the heading of specialists in schools with time outside. Sorry, it's difficult to see. So I'm going to jump to the sentence that says the principal and pertinent staff. Angie, I don't know if you want to highlight it. There you go. The principal and pertinent staff will collaboratively determine based on student needs and educator expertise. We added that portion in. How staff time beyond plan time, PLC, and daily 25-minute duty-free lunch, travel time, prep, and cleanup time when traveling will be utilized. We went on in the next sentence to add, this collaboration will be held at the start of each semester and documented by the principal. So that is the district's language that we've kind of included. We've included in that, so it all runs together. Those are kind of the changes that we suggest. We really liked your suggestion of meeting at the beginning of the semester, and we wanted to bring that over to include our traveling specialists and kind of make sure that they're able to meet with their home principal and the principal of the building they are supporting. Our goal with this is to kind of check off top 3 main interests our elementary specialists had, to kind of ensure that our specialist teams are meeting with those administrators to collaborate on what is best for the kids. Our elementary specialists are very, very strongly wanting to feel that their expertise and their knowledge is being recognized in ways to service to the building, in addition to supporting in things that necessitate their help. And we know we have an interest in opening more conversations on access our students have to equitable learning experiences for our traveling specialists. So we feel like the language we proposed here kind of hits those main points. But we're interested, obviously this is going to be an ongoing kind of conversation. This problem is much bigger than what is, can be encapsulated in language. So continuing to kind of work together on both sides of the table to meet the needs of all of our staff and students.
I think the other thing I would add is, I think it was you, Dr. Sick, that asked at our last meeting about the conditions document, which was one of the papers I had in front of me. Oh, nope, not that one, but the 10 items, and you, I think it was you that asked about, like, so is this just for elementary specialists? And I kind of talked about that's kind of where it came from. So I would be really interested in being able to get input from any educator who's traveling, and then work with the district on how we could use that as like a guiding document to kind of build a better conversation, a more productive conversation about, we have these limits when there's traveling educators, right? I mean, they have to travel because there are needs, and we have limits at the buildings, but being able to bring that educator voice into what are some things that would really make a big difference for them, which is why we took it out of our proposed language to have it in the agreement. But we would be interested in like looking at how we can collaborate on that document, because I think that document has a lot of really good information in there. I don't think there's a lot in there that we could argue about in terms of what's best for students, but I think probably we've got some work to do on how we can make that document usable in a practical sense, and maybe not just for elementary specialists, but for any of our educators that travel. So that's why that was struck out of the language Shelby spoke about. It's not, we're not suggesting to put that document in the appendix B.
Did you guys have this in the SharePoint?
We don't yet. I don't have a computer. Can somebody put it in there? You can download it as a Word document or file. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd like to start with a little bit of information, what's been new. As we indicated last time, everybody knows what the starting salaries are across the area, and they're only going to continue to increase this year. We know Spring Hill is going to go to 51,000. So it would be naive not to think that all of them are going to creep up, and probably most of them be over the 50,000 mark. At the same time, this is a little difficult to read, but as a district, we have the highest average total salaries across the state of Kansas. So the challenge is not so much in overall compensation or lifetime earnings. Right now, the challenge is really up in starting salaries. So our proposal would be to, as we stated last week, I guess, provide a column movement, do the ECAS additions for event coverage, pay rate, and the esports, not all 9 of them. Increase the paid coverage rate from the $30 to the $40, and then honor the absorbing all of the cost of the health insurance increase. However, we would still remain at the moving the starting teacher salary up to $50,000 and do the same placement as we've done this year. We would place any new hires with no experience in step 2, and we would place new hires with experience in their appropriate level. We would also increase that, since it's tied to the base, the ECAS stipends would go up as well. Excuse me. So just recapping similar to last time, really the overall investment now that the board would be making is over $10 million. And as somebody put it, when we're doing couch cushion budgeting, when we have $1 million, every penny is going to count. And even this week, we found out we got our final audit finally, $700,000 decrease. So we're even deeper in the hole. There's not even the $1 million to lean on. So it becomes a big challenge that we really believe strongly we need to get the teacher salary, starting teacher salary up. It still provides a very positive overall increase that teachers will feel a 5.2% increase between the 3.1 of salary and then absorbing the health insurance benefits. That's the equivalent of 5.2. And I believe we spent 18 months, 24 months in that salary schedule subcommittee. And I know I think the word was used well, recognition of another year. I thought we were very clear as a committee that the numbers, at one point looked at making them letters, don't represent years of experience. It is movement, but we were trying to give flexibility to when we have these years where we don't have funding, you can put it on the base, everybody feels an increase, but it doesn't compound the issue if you can't afford both movements. Similarly, last year was the equivalent of movement of 3 steps. So there'll be years that I thought we had discussed could do it, and there'd be years we wouldn't do it, that we'd have those various variables to utilize in order to still get increases down to the staff. So that would be our updated offer for this evening.
Your slide on the teacher salary average, is that KSDE?
Last year's data. 23, 24. I'm sorry, 24, 25, it's this year. Sorry.
So that average total salaries is taking into account the cost benefits as well.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Can you put the number of what this package is, 10?
10. So let's try to catch up. Just over 10. $10,012,000.
Add this little tidbit that I rarely hear from our HR recruiters about the difficulty with our starting salary, and it's most certainly hitting us this year. We are not getting great candidates accepting our offers because of our starting salary. So I think that piece that John shared about the importance of that, although I know it has an impact on our veteran educators, but I think when we really look at those professionals entering our career path, that's what they look at, is that starting salary. And I think we can all understand that. And so I think every penny there makes a difference. And it's something that our board feels really strongly about as well, that we get that to that 50,000. So we're feeling that impact of being one of the lowest.
Based on the 4 minutes we have before our scheduled end time, I think we probably accomplished what we can accomplish today, and then we'll come back next week and after we get a chance to kind of digest the offer. And
And Jen dropped those slides in the proposals.
thank you. Yep, I got the elementary specialist language that we had on the screen. I got that in there. I didn't get the appraisal language. Are we okay on that appraisal language? Because I can get that in there. I just haven't. So I didn't know if we need to circle back to that again next week.
Yeah, I want to put it in there.
Yeah. Perfect. Got you. Okay. All right. Any other things we need to put in the files? No. The 13th, lucky number 13. And that is next Tuesday. Yeah. 4:45, this room. All right, thank you.